Greetings folks, Zealer here. Today's replay is courtesy of Jamesalot, who is sailing for us the premium Tier 10 French light cruiser, the Colbert. This is a Tier 10 domination match on two brothers. There is one Tier 8 aircraft carrier per team, as you can probably tell based on the airplanes that Jamesalot is shooting down. And there is also quite a few battleships, on each team. Now, Jamesalot's build in the Colbert focuses on setting fires with Demolition Expert. He also maximizes the range of the shells out to 19.2 kilometers with both the advanced firing training skill and the gunfire control systems upgrade in slot 6. This ship is also commanded by one of the Honoré brothers that gives him a buffed adrenaline rush skill. Now, this match is going to be very close at the end. It won't look that way for quite a while. In fact, Jamesalot's team will fall quite far behind for much of the match. And I'm going to give an early shout out to both the Allied gearing here, who has dropped smoke for Jamesalot. In fact, Jamesalot is being successfully blind fired onto, or at least you took a little bit of chip damage by somebody who fired into the smoke. So again, a shout out to the Allied gearing here that is going to do a very good job, in my opinion, for the team, as well as the Allied Graf Zeppelin, who is going to do a very good job, despite being in a Tier 10 match, focusing the right targets. And I think he also does a pretty good job on spotting. So a couple of early shout outs in this match, and that will be a little bit of a teaser as to how things will end up going here. So my thoughts on the Colbert. So first thing is that I think most people know, but in case they don't, the Colbert is one of two reward ships available in the Research Bureau for Research Bureau points. The other is the USS Ohio. That's the Tier 10 U.S. Navy battleship. I suspect, at least on the North America server, the Ohio is by far and away the more popular of the two ships to take as a reward ship. But the Colbert is a very good boat. It's sort of a blend, or characterized as a blend between the Smolensk in terms of the number of guns it has, and I'll talk a little bit more about the gun layout here in a moment. As well as the shell characteristics of kind of like the Atlanta that you can tell here based on Jamesalot's success in being able to hit this battleship that's parked behind an island that he's trying to wear down and get the Kremlin off the map. The Colbert's guns are 127 millimeter, and out of the barrels their velocity is 808 meters per second, which is pretty slow. And so it gives the Colbert these pretty high arcs, especially at mid and long range, as you can see here. And this does give Jamesalot some advantage on being able to hit these targets that might be camped behind an island and be able to hit them with some reliability as the Kremlin is taken down. And so each team is down one ship. One difficulty that I could anticipate if I had the Colbert is that hitting targets at range, especially maneuverable targets, is probably kind of a challenge. And so while this cruiser that he's firing on right now is not quite that far away like the battleship was, I can imagine that trying to hit targets, like I said, at range, especially ones that are very maneuverable, might be quite difficult, and is probably a pretty learned practice. And this is something that I think a lot of players that pick up something like the Atlanta or pick up the U.S. Navy destroyers, they experience these sort of very floaty shells that have these very high arcs, and that has the advantage, like I said, of being able to shoot over terrain quite reliably, but also it's like I said, a really learned practice in order to hit things at distance. Now, looking at the tactical situation, the Allies' strong flank obviously is on the west side. They have secured Alpha. The enemy is obviously much stronger on the east side, and they've taken Delta. So things are relatively, well, they're even certainly in terms of the caps. The Allies have lost 3 ships to the 2 ships that the opponents have lost, but now we've detected the opposing Graf Zeppelin on the that's over at Charlie 7, it looks like. So things at this point are still relatively even, but Jamesalot's team is going to fall further and further behind here because the opposition does have a couple of ships that are moving up the central channel, which right now isn't a bad thing, because assuming that the opposition has a clear view of the position of Jamesalot's fleet. In fact, you can see there's some pinging on the map here as those couple of opponents are moving up the central channel. There's not a strong likelihood that the opposition moving through the channel will come into a crossfire, because there's nobody on the east flank that can. There's an Alsace and there's an Udaloy on Jamesalot's team that's way over on the 9 line. They're not going to be in a position really to fire into the Charlie Cap, which is now being taken by the opposition. So the opposition, in fact, they've just taken down another one of Jamesalot's teammates, and so Jamesalot's team is working with a 2-ship deficit. Now, again, I gave a shout out to the Gearing. He's dropped a second set of smoke for Jamesalot to be able to put fire from concealment on the opponents that are on the east side of Bravo, and the Gearing is going to move into the cap. Now, the Lenin on Jamesalot's team, which is also moving into the Bravo cap, he is going to be the focus of a few ships, including, I suspect, the aircraft carrier, because he's the only thing right now that they can see that is in the Charlie cap or Bravo cap. And in fact, he has just now gone down. So, and in fact, the Allies have lost another ship in addition to the Lenin. So they already have a 4-ship deficit. They are just barely getting Bravo right now because the Gearing is in the cap. He's currently not being detected by planes. It looks like the enemy aircraft carrier is going after the Allied aircraft carrier. I'm not sure why the enemy aircraft carrier wouldn't be focusing on trying to detect the destroyer that is in Bravo right now. And Jamesalot is doing what he can to defend Gearing from the advancing Hindenburg that's about to push into the Bravo cap. Jamesalot is able, obviously, firing here from concealment reliably thanks to the smoke. He has gotten a few fires on the Hindenburg. The Hindenburg looks like he just damage controlled, but the DPM on the Colbert is very, very high. Now, one thing I should point out about the build that Jamesalot has on the Colbert, he does not take IFHE, and I asked him about this when he sent the replay over. In his opinion, increasing the penetration of the 127mm guns with IFHE, as Jamesalot is able to finish off the Hindenburg, the penetration benefit of increasing the 127s, which can penetrate up to 21mm, and increasing that penetration to 27mm with IFHE is a pretty high investment. And the main value that would bring is being able to combat cruisers. And because there's a lot of cruiser surfaces on bows and sterns, which are 25 or 27mm, but there's also a lot of decks that are 30mm that, even with IFHE, the Colbert would not be able to penetrate on a lot of upper tier cruisers. So I think in Jamesalot's opinion, having IFHE was simply too much of an investment for not enough value, and I can certainly see where that's coming from. So he focuses on being able to hit the softer areas of the ships, like the superstructures on cruisers and battleships, and setting fires. And I think that, not losing the fire potential from taking IFHE or from avoiding taking IFHE is a good trade-off as well. So again, coming back to the tactical situation, as Jamesalot's team continues to fall further and further behind. They have a 3-ship deficit. They're behind by almost 300 points. The opponents have moved into, they had moved into Charlie quite a while ago, and they're still working on taking that cap. But the Allies are down to the Gearing, the aircraft carrier, Jamesalot, and an Alsace player that is at Juliet 5 or Juliet 6. Now, you can argue that the Alsace is not in a position to support the team very well, and to a large extent you'd be right. However, the Alsace was one of very few ships that survived the strong flank of the opposition that had been on the east side. And in fact, what this Alsace player will do, and I don't know whether this is intentional or whether this is just blind luck, but he is going to draw off a number of the opponents from focusing the objective, and that will actually, to some extent, help the allies. So the Alsace really, like I said, isn't in a position to be able to support the objectives per se, but his position and his role, intended or otherwise, is actually drawing attention away. He's going to draw off both the Yamato and the Thunderer, at least two ships and maybe more, from trying to stay on the objectives. Now, the coming back to Bravo that Jamesalot and the Gearing have been trying to take here for the last few minutes, still haven't secured. Jamesalot is going to push in here and help finish off the Minotaur, but fortunately the Gearing's torpedoes do get the Minotaur down, and now Jamesalot and the Gearing can work on taking this cap. Now, one of the other roles that Jamesalot is playing here is he's turning his ship to keep his, or he was trying to keep his reinforced AA sector toward the Gearing so that the Gearing would be defended from the planes that were sent by the aircraft carrier. And it looks like he was pretty successful in doing that. But unfortunately, Jamesalot slipped out of the cap as process of doing that. The Gearing is going to move back in. Now, Jamesalot is looking to come back over to try to defend Alpha. Again, I gave an early shout out to the Graf Zeppelin that's in front of Jamesalot here. The Graf Zeppelin, is looking to try to keep the Gearing that we can now detect spotted. And Jamesalot's going to come over here and try to get at least drive off the Daring, try to drive him out of the cap, but preferably take him out. And the Graf Zeppelin has been very situationally aware. He's been reliably moving his ship away from the threats as the opponents have been pushing sort of clockwise around the map and have secured Charlie and are now pushing towards Alpha. Now, Jamesalot has just earned Confederate, so he's clearly doing a lot of damage to a lot of different ships, but he's in a situation where he could get into a crossfire. Now, he does end up burning out the Daring, so that was good. So the ship counts are actually even now, but the Allies are so far behind in points that they will end up needing to try to sink all ships in order to win this game. They do take down, between the Gearing and the aircraft carrier and Jamesalot's firepower, they are able to take down the Graf Zeppelin. I don't know why the opposing Graf Zeppelin advanced towards the bulk of the firepower on Jamesalot's team, or what was remaining. I don't know whether he was trying to be cheeky and use the secondaries to take out the Gearing, or maybe he was just trying to defend Bravo. He would have been better off just continuing to sail clockwise, in my opinion, around the map. Now, there's a ping on the map here from Jamesalot on the center of the map, because the opposing Massachusetts is now moving back north through the channel toward Bravo. And clearly the Gearing and the Graf Zeppelin should make their best effort to detect and defend the now secure Bravo cap from the Massachusetts. At this point, I don't think that they knew how healthy the Massachusetts was, and the Gearing's got to keep his distance. The Gearing obviously could torpedo the Massachusetts, but if he gets detected, the Massachusetts secondaries could very well finish off the Gearing quite quickly, and so I think the Gearing's making a good choice here to stay away. Now, the Gearing is trying to position himself in a way that he's outside of a detection, but he's able to detect the Massachusetts, which he now has in the middle of the map. And and then coming back to Jamesalot's perspective, he's putting fire on the Yamato the Musashi that the aircraft carrier was also focusing. So now they've actually gotten a two-ship advantage, and they've thinned the lead of the opposition by less than 100 points. Now each team holds 2 caps, so they're going to advance their points at the same rate. And the thunder has earned that Jamesalot is now firing upon is a significant threat. If the thunder is able to get a good shot off, these 457 millimeter rounds are very accurate, and they have very high alpha, and he is firing armor piercing. So if he were to hit Jamesalot and even get one citadel, he could take out far more than half of Jamesalot's remaining health at this point. Here comes another salvo. And this is a place where I mentioned earlier that trying to get these very floaty shells to hit reliably at range could be quite difficult. You can see he's got 4 or 5 salvos in the air at the same time, but the thunder is 18 plus kilometers away, so it's quite difficult for him, for Jamesalot, in order to hit the thunder. The Alsace that I mentioned earlier on Jamesalot's team is now on the 1 line at India 1, and again, he has continued to draw off both. I mentioned earlier it was a Yamato, it was actually a Musashi, but the Musashi and the Thunder have been drawn off by the Alsace. I don't know if the Alsace is in a position now that he can't get undetected, and he simply is going to have to try to do his best against the Thunder. Thunder clearly had a lot of health, and I don't think that we knew at any point how, at least in this replay, how healthy the Alsace was, but we do know now that the Alsace was down to his last few hit points, and the Thunder was able to finish him off. So the Allies have now fallen much more behind. The Massachusetts B here is down to probably about a quarter of his health, and he has moved into the Bravo cap, and so is keeping the Jamesalot's team from getting points from this cap. Here comes the salvo from the Massachusetts B. He does get at least a couple of citadels, I would guess that was on Jamesalot, take out most of his remaining health. But Jamesalot's DPM here is very high, and again, so long as he's setting fires, he's just earned Wither. So long as he's setting fires and can hit the superstructure, he will continue to get good damage. Here comes the next salvo from the Massachusetts B, but this is going to miss, I think, entirely. And so that's another potential set of damage avoided. The Graf Zeppelin on Jamesalot's team does get a couple of torpedoes on the Massachusetts B. The alpha on the torpedoes are quite low, and the torpedo protection on the Massachusetts is very good. But fortunately, Jamesalot is able to finish off the Massachusetts before he's able to get another salvo off. Now let's look at the situation. They've turned this around to a 2-ship advantage. They've secured 3 of the 4 caps, but they are behind by about 60 points. Now, at the current rate of progress, they will gain 80 points per minute on the opposition. There is less than a minute left. They do not have enough time. Even though the Gearing made a very good attempt to secure caps and try to delay points, there isn't enough time to win on points by capturing alone. They have to sink the Thunder. The Thunder is beyond the range of Jamesalot. Unfortunately, I think his steering was broken. That's why he had continued to go in circles. And unfortunately, the Graf Zeppelin, despite his best efforts to try to stay concealed as much as he could, is taken out by the Thunder, and unfortunately Jamesalot's team does end up losing. But again, really impressive performance by Jamesalot, just shy of 200,000 with and Confederate earned. I'm surprised High Caliber wasn't included. He shot down 26 planes. Again, hats off to this Graf Zeppelin and the Gearing. Both of them stayed very focused on the objective. All 3 of them came in top for their team. This was a really close match that they almost pulled off. Unfortunately, it was a loss, but they did a really great job. So thanks very much, Jamesalot, for sharing with the group. I hope everybody enjoyed the replay and the commentary. And as always, we hope to see you out there on the virtual seas, and we wish you happy sailing.